So tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you get here?
Um, Good question. Thank you, Micah. Nice to be here with you guys, Solarpunks. Um, I'm Neal Hegarty. I'm 39 years old. I'm from Ireland originally, County Cork in Ireland, and actually came here first to Guatemala first 12 years ago to work with an NGO on a project. That was the major start of a revolution in my life when I started to realize that a lot of what NGOs and charities are doing in organizations like this just did not resonate with me at all. Didn't make sense to me. So, uh, my family are farmers. My family are dairy farmers, and I learned a lot from my uncle about sort of stewarding the land. I think I saw him as an inspirational character in my life, and so kind of when I saw the way land management was being practiced here and also is somewhat promoted by NGOs in the area, I was quite shocked, and it sent me on a voyage of discovery as well, analysing my own part in a kind of a global system that you know essentially exploits countries like Guatemala to produce and extract raw materials so that sort of we in Western countries can live the good life, or live the kind of consumery life. So I got really into permaculture following that first trip out here 12 years ago, and really into looking for solutions, I suppose. And um, it was a long journey, but I ended up coming back here to write my thesis about 7 years ago, and I came to work for an organization called EMAP, the Mesoamerican Permaculture Institute. It's a group of Mayan guys that practice permaculture. One of them is from Quixaya, the community that you visited, and the rest of them are from San Lucas. So I went to work for them for about a year and a half because I was very drawn on the idea that they have of using permaculture as a sort of a cultural preservation tool. I learned when I was with them. I learned a lot about the native plants of this area, native medicines, but also like alternative ways of seeing the world, which I was also at the time very interested in. Very interested in the idea that I cannot, I'm not capable of solving these problems from the level of awareness that I'm currently occupying. So there might be more important to start learning to see things in a new way than it is to try and come up with answers. And that was a good, that was definitely a good perspective to take. I now realize. So I learned an awful lot from those guys. Afterwards, started to work as a kind of a project manager and a consultant, and a teacher in the area. Worked in Antigua for a while, became very good friends with my partner Jeremy Dexter Fellows, and 3 years ago we bought this land and started, no, it's closer to 4 years ago now actually. We called it Granja Siquin because we had that in Siquin is one of the Mayan Nahuales. It means abundance. It's the energy of abundance. A lot of people have like questioned me about that name because they're like, gringos can't say it. Why do you have a name that gringos can't pronounce? But I'm like, you know what? I like it, and I think it's an important part of our story as well. Which, in a sense, our story is about a little bit getting over this idea of Westerners bad, Indigenous people good, kind of thing, and being like, well, no, we're all Indigenous to somewhere, and the name Indigenous itself doesn't really mean anything, but I think what it conjures for people is people who have a deep connection to the place they're from and a sense of stewardship around the place they're from. And in that sense, I think it's very imperative for the current kind of generation, the generations that are coming up now, to reconnect and really deeply reconnect to the place they're from and become indigenous to it, and to start stewarding the land and the ecosystem that they have part of. So part of and I really do believe that when you do that, a really true abundance kind of can come into your life, if you do it well and if you commit to the journey.
Absolutely. What a beautiful way to connect with the land. Beautiful journey.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's it's a cliche to say, right, that that the journey is more important than the destination. But it is true. And the thing I think that I talk that I talk a lot to people about now is that it's more important to, if this is something you feel called to do, it's more important just to kind of start and figure it out as you go along, because it's that same thing that I was talking about. It's like you will learn so much in the process of really connecting to a piece of land and really coming up with a system that works. You can't just read a permaculture book and be like, oh, I'm gonna make biochar and compost and grow food. There's a whole series of problems that you'll have to overcome to really connect to the level where you're, because sustainable ultimately does, I think, mean for most people sustainable in terms of what, in terms of the actual input that you're willing to put into your system and how much you get out of it, and finding that balance. Do you want to be in the farm working all the time? Do you want to be doing other stuff? Finding that process, finding who your tribe is, who your community is. There's an awful lot of problems that you need to work out along the way, but you work them out on the way, and you grow and you mature as you do it. And I've become aware that certainly, like, healing myself and going on this process, that commitment is something that's very hard for our generation. Actually, being like, well, if I commit to this path, I'm now saying no to all these other ones, and that's hard for us because we're bombarded now with so much information and so many possibilities. But actually doing it, actually choosing, you know what, I could do a million other things, but I'm going to do this thing, and I could be with a million other groups of people, but I'm choosing these ones. It's the best thing you can do. Of course, some discernment at the start is important, because you don't want to just jump in, you don't want to just start living in any old place. You want to feel really connected to the place and really connected to the people you're with, and you need to let your body make those decisions, actually not your mind. But then once you have it, it's the most gratifying, rewarding experience that you can possibly have.
It's a really grounding experience.
It's literally grounding. Yeah. And that's one of those terms that I think is a little bit overused, in my opinion, in the sort of new age community. But yeah, it is, and it's grounding, it's humbling, but it's absolutely fantastic, and the rewards that I've gotten from it have been amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. I would like to ask how you're integrating with the local people, and how your interactions with them, what are they teaching you, or what have you gotten to teach them?
Like that, wow, I could talk all day about that one. So again, like when I came here, it was something I always resisted, but when I came here first 12 years ago to work for an NGO, there was very much this idea that you as a young advisor need to go out to these communities and help them to, whatever this project was particularly concerned with, sort of agricultural inputs and outputs. And it straight away sets up that kind of dynamic of like, well, you're white and from a rich country, so you know best, and you need to help them, and they're poor, and it's an absolutely terrible attitude for all kinds of reasons. And like I say, I never bought into it particularly, but I came back here. I deliberately came back here 7 years ago with a totally open capacity of just, I want to learn, and that's why I started my second journey in Guatemala in EMAP, where I kind of sought out and identified these sort of elders. Ronaldo Lec and Ramiro Sanun were like real teachers for me, and thankfully kind of took me under their wing a bit and really taught me a lot about, not just about how to manage land, not just about the technical stuff, about the right plants to use, and the different terracing systems and irrigation systems that were like appropriate, but more importantly, like how to see things. And I very much like I think internalized that there's like there's so many different ways that we can see things, and that in a lot of senses the indigenous people here, they just have a totally different way of interpreting the world. And that's one of the really damaging things about kind of coming in, charging into an area with this like white savior mentality. And since we've settled down here, particularly in Sununa, it's been very much, I've always viewed it more as like a collaboration. I I felt very called, firstly, to establish something real here before going out too much, before trying to extend myself too much. And so, practically speaking, one of the first things we started to do here was to buy coffee from people and process it here. And we developed a little nice model system, I think, of that lets us deal with coffee in an appropriate way, right? So we were able to buy the coffee in at a good price, much better than the local middlemen pay. We're able to process it here on site and use all the byproducts. So we make biochar, we make worm compost, we make liquid fertilizer from the runoff water, and that was just a nice little project because it helped the farm because we got all this biomass. It helped them because it helped our neighbours because we were able to buy the coffee from them at a better price than they would normally get, and then we're able to give compost back to them. So now we have our own small few organic coffee producers that produce coffee for our cafe, right? And that's just a nice little thing. And then with those same people that we have, because it's all about relationships, it's all about trust. So rather than kind of going out and being like, we're doing a coffee project in the whole valley and come and, it's like we found the people that we had the best relationships with, and we started working with them. With a lot of them, with Maria and her sister that run our kitchen, their family grow coffee for us, but they also grow a lot of other crops for us. So we give them seeds of things that we know grow super well here, and they know it as well, like cassava, sweet potato, pigeon pea, things like that. Things that can really just be kind of planted in rainy season and forgotten about, which fits perfectly with them because they're very busy doing other things. And we let them take as much compost or seeds as they need, and then we buy the harvest back off them, and they're psyched because these are amazingly high quality foods, but they're not valued. That's the funny thing about countries like this. Mm-hmm. I guess it's really everywhere. The sort of foods that are perceived to be kind of like semi-wild and don't grow in neat little rows, often people don't value them in the market. So of course everyone here wants to grow like broccoli or onions or things that aren't really from here and can be grown, but it's difficult, right? And people don't value things like taro root or cassava or chippy leaf. You do, but a lot of people do, but people who come here do. So that's the nice thing about this as well, is that we have this kind of hub of people who are conscious about what they eat and where it comes from. So we've been able to know, and we have a kind of a growing little network of producers who are already growing coffee, but they can interplant these things, and it kind of helps the coffee, and then when the yield comes, they can bring it as much of it as they want here and as much of it home, and we're able to buy it from them for a good price. So that's been a good one. I also design and build houses for people, so that's been nice in the sense that Sununa tourism is relatively new to Sununa. People have been foreigners and people from the capital, people with money have been settling here for a while, but it's starting to ramp up now. And previously, people who settled here, they had their houses built by outsiders. There's been a lot of development in like San Juan and San Marcos, so you have a lot of very skilled tradespeople from there, and so the kind of construction crews and the architects tended to come in, design the house for the people, and then give the work to people from out of town. So me and Jeremy have had like the real pleasure of finding some really great young people here from Sununa that have worked with us since the start of this farm, doing all our buildings, and we've now gotten them scholarships to go to the trade school in Santa Cruz, and we have our own full construction crew of young guys from Sunana. I have like one proper carpenter, but four more in training, and a couple of really excellent stone workers and electricians, and setting up a system where I'm training my job as a project manager to the oldest guys, who are then training their jobs to the younger guys, and we're actually setting up a legit construction company where we mostly, I do use a little bit of cement and steel in the houses that I design, but it's mostly local wood, local mud, and ecological building, and a team that knows how to do it and can like get paid as professionals. So again, it's more of a collaboration though, because what I've realized is that it needs to be that, because if it's this kind of like, I'm going to help you and you're going to do this thing, it often falls apart and it doesn't work. Whereas if it's this kind of like, whoa, there's actually real money to be made building houses in this community, and I don't want to do all that logistical work or do all that planning, and we need to put a team together of skilled people who can actually do that stuff, and everybody wins when we do that. And it's so it needs to be those kind of like win-win symbiotic development of symbiotic relationships that are built up like slowly over time, and there's also a biomimicry element to that. I've realized, because I do a lot of consultation for NGOs, and they still have this kind of like, what technology can we bring and introduce into these towns to fix these things? And it's like, unless it comes from people's hearts and unless it like organically comes out, there's no easy solution to just a myriad of problems that we have facing us as human beings at this time. So what you actually need is, in order for cultures to shift gradually, you just need people doing this like slow but steady daily work in their areas with a sort of a long-term vision and commitment. And it like I say, it requires being much more humble. It's much easier to think like, oh, if we could just come along and give everyone a plug-in biodigester and plant a food forest for them, everything would be great. But for all kinds of reasons, which I could go into if I had more time, those things just don't work. And so it's slower than that. But that's good.
Awesome. Sustainable organization and
Yeah, sustainable organization. That's the thing. It's like, if you look at how I was explaining this to a large company recently that hired me to do some consulting stuff for them, and they're very much stuck in this top-down mentality. And I was kind of like trying to explain to them that the way stable patterns emerge in nature is, or the way stable systems emerge in nature, is through small replicable patterns that kind of spread out from a nucleus. Seeing how a hive of bees constructs a beehive is kind of instructive in that, right? Or seeing the way a tree grows from the inside out. Those patterns are kind of all around us, and we really should be looking to base our organizations and our communities sort of along the same lines, right? And so what you have now, actually, it's funny, you have a lot of problems that were created by this kind of like top-down approach, especially in large organizations and companies, but also in nation states. This kind of like, nobody worry, just go and live in these nuclear or suburban dwelling lots, and let the city worry about where your wastewater goes, and let the city worry about that, and let the government worry about how your kids get educated. And it's terrible, because people are left with no sort of resilience or creativity, and what you're seeing now actually is those big organizations that have been designed that way are starting to crumble under their own weight,
right.
which in some senses is a good thing, but it's also a little bit scary, and I think people are scared about it. So the solution is kind of to very much go back to basics, to developing like one healthy functioning farm and community, and then get that to interact with the things on its edge and to slowly kind of branch out and reorganize along those lines. And for large companies, I think it's very much a case of like, okay, let's try now to degrow in a sense and actually organize small pilot projects that can be done with the intention of building our capacity and the capacity of our people, so that they can have more of a creative mindset. And then when you can actually, if you can actually incorporate a more creative mindset into organizations in proportion to how they grow, you can actually build some real resilience into that. I'm not sure if that's understandable or not, but
It is understandable.
yeah.
You are so inspiring, and I appreciate you so much for
Thank you.
all that you do and all that you are, all that you've done here. It's really great to meet you and talk about these things.
Thank you. It's good to be here.